Hello, Andrew. Now, this is a new thing for us. Last week, we had a really interesting chat with Tom Woodhams, who's a tech recruiter, an ADHD champion and advocate. There was a lot in there. So, this new format is a chance for you and I to maybe look at some of the things that came out of that conversation in more detail and to try and use those as points to help other people in their journey of ADHD and understanding and in the world. Now, Tom definitely had some very unique experiences, but there was also a lot he said that I think lots of people related to will have sat and gone, that's my experience or similar, which I think says a lot. And I think the place to start for me was the way he spoke about how he eventually sought a diagnosis as an adult. So the bit that jumped out to me initially was that at 12, I think 13 years old, his mum had taken him to the doctor because she noticed the fidgeting, she noticed the restlessness, she noticed the school reports could do better if only could concentrate. And yet, at that point, he was sent away with he's just an excitable child. The fact that it then took another 20 years for him and for his behaviours, and I don't like using that word, but that's what they really present as, the behaviours he mentioned in terms of being sacked from jobs and overindulgence and even addictions, getting so destructive that it took two family members, his mum and I think he said his granddad, saying, you need to go and get checked out because what you're doing is not what, again, his words, but words with all of her, but at some point, it's not normal. So what do you make of that as a clinician?
It's an all too familiar story, and there are reasons why that story pans out. You know, it's why fewer children in the UK get diagnosed with ADHD than in the US. There's a different threshold of understanding of childhood ADHD. So we talk about 5% of the child population, where Americans talk about 10. So I think the sensitivity, particularly going back to Tom's childhood, you know, he's not an old man like us, but he is, you know, older. He was late diagnosed. I think that journey is probably familiar to lots of people. And yeah, the details of the stories that Tom told are particular to his journey, but the themes are very, very common. You know, that is the story that lots of, particularly men, will tell when they come for a diagnosis over the age of 30. But I think there was, you know, with hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, we can see the harms that were done by minimizing what was brought to that clinician when Tom was in his teenage years.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
think Tom would change that story. I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I don't think he would go back and say, well, actually, I should have been diagnosed at 12 and medicated, because he wouldn't be Tom.
I agree. I've been asked that question many times. Would you change it? And I've always said no.
No, I wouldn't.
I wouldn't. I think there's an element that we could say it's a shame that people have to go through such issues to then go, maybe I should go and see a professional diagnosis as an adult. But I don't think there's validity in saying if I could go back and change it or get diagnosed sooner, because you wouldn't be the same person. What was interesting for me when he spoke about his experience of that assessment was what he seemed to be saying he was looking for, which was almost a Me Too moment, someone to nod and go, yes, I feel you, I get that, yes, I do that too. And that's ADHD. Whereas what it seemed like he got was that sage clinical nodding, there's a diagnosis. And I wonder what you thought about that story and the way he presented that.
Okay, so there's a lot in that, and there's a lot in my own professional reflections about that and how I work as a clinician. As people with ADHD, we're really good at doing exactly what Tom was asking for, you know, that sort of relating to someone's experience. We look for that in others, which isn't a neurotypical trait. So you'll see lots on social media about how how those of us with ADHD will sort of demonstrate connection by saying "me too." It's something that we do, yeah, and we tell our story, and if you've not got ADHD, that can seem like it's all about me, but actually it's all about me saying to you, yeah, I've experienced something similar. I'm checking with you. Is that right?
Yeah.
So there's something about the way people with ADHD communicate, but on the counter side, which is what Tom was looking for, but on the counter side of that, there's a lot in professional training about leaving your shit at the door. You don't bring your story into the clinical consultation because it's not about you. It's about the person who you're seeing.
Yeah.
So that experience is that experience that Tom was looking for is in part trained out of us, that we shouldn't be bringing our stuff. And it's throughout my career, it's been a sort of a wrangle between what of myself do I bring into clinical practice and what do I leave at the consultation door, so that I can engage with someone. And I think every clinician has their own personal journey on that, be they diagnosed with ADHD or not. But I think there are differences in the way a clinician with ADHD would deliver that work as compared to a clinician without ADHD, and both have their advantages and disadvantages. It's about, and you get this with mentoring and coaching as well, it's about that connection, isn't it? It's that meet and greet. Are you the right person for me? Because some people do want and just the room to, but others don't. So it's important to find the right person for you. And I think I've said this on the podcast before, having that connection with the clinician and feeling that the clinician is getting you is a very, very important part of that therapeutic relationship. So
I think it is.
Yeah, it's not as simple as saying, well, I wanted someone to do more than say because actually those were giving room for Tom to tell his story. But Tom was looking, I think, as we ADHDers do, for a different kind of connection. So if you're not feeling that connection, then it's not there. That's not right for you.
Do you think, as a clinician who is diagnosed now, because you talk about how it would be different for a clinician with versus without, do you ever feel the weight of expectation when people come to see you? And are you able to disconnect from that? You talk about it being trained out of you, leave your stuff at the door, and I agree with that, rightly so. But do you ever feel that weight of, I know that somebody here is looking for answers? Because as you say, how many times have people come to you going, everything's going swimmingly, life's wonderful, I'd just like to know if I've got this neurological condition? Or versus like Tom's story, the wheels are falling off, my life's an absolute shit show, and somebody said they think I need to get looked at. Is a very different start to a conversation, isn't it? But how do you process, or how do you deal with that?
So that's a constant and live reflective process. That's the inner monologue that happens all the time. So often when I'm working clinically, the little voice in my head is saying, "Shut up, Andrew. Give them room to talk. You're talking too much."
Right.
So I fight with my ADHD in clinical practice every time I open that door to someone coming in, because I'm having to have that debate with myself. Is this my ADHD? Is me saying this of value to this person, or am I just burbling on because I've got ADHD?
Right.
That's the work.
The next question then that comes to mind is there some validity in setting people's expectations of what an assessment will look like? So, Tom saying he went in expecting or wanting more validation, more me tooing, but had he gone in and known that it was going to be more of a, and I use the term dry process, a dry clinical interview rather than a "yes, I feel you" kind of a thing, do you think that would help more people go, all right, I know what this process will look like?
It could, but it could equally confuse more people. It's really tricky. But an ADHD assessment is it's a dialogue. Yeah. So if it's even between Sarah and I, we do a very, very different ADHD assessment, and everyone is different because everyone is about those two people talking and those two people bringing something to it. So I bring my expertise in understanding the literature and the science around ADHD, but the person that I'm seeing brings their expertise about themselves, and it's that dialogue that brings out an understanding of that person's story in the context of the literature. That's what an assessment should be. It should be a dialogue that gives rise to a combination of those expertises. That's how I practice my craft. But it is possible. And if I think back to the early days of my ADHD career, I relied a lot more on the DIVA. So that's the semi-structured interview for ADHD. As I've done more and more of those conversations, it becomes more of a dialogue because that framework that is given by the semi-structured interview is there in my head. So I can have a lot more natural conversation than I used to have because I know what I'm looking for. I'm familiar with it. But when I first started out, I wasn't. So when I'm training people, I will do symptom bingo with people. So I'll watch me do an assessment. Here's a bingo card. You mark off when I'm getting those symptoms described enough.
Makes sense.
And that helps the novice understand what's going on, because it's very possible to do a tick box exercise, but because it is, the diagnostic criteria, we've talked about them on the podcast. It's A, B, C, D, E. Work through them. But that's not human communication, and there's no room in that for the kind of dialogue that Tom was looking for in his assessment. So I think it takes skill to bring what Tom was asking for. It takes experience to be able to do that, because I know when I was inexperienced, I couldn't have done it like I do it now.
Okay, so let's summarize this bit before I move on to what I think makes sense from this part. Somebody sat listening to this, watching this, at the point of thinking about pushing the button to seek an assessment or a diagnosis, however they do that. What, for you as a clinician, is the most useful advice you could give them about what to expect from that process?
What to expect? I think you've got to start the lowest common denominator stuff, haven't we? You've got to expect that someone will do all the things we talked about in the episode we did on what a good assessment looks like. They should be helping you to talk through what you're experiencing in relation to those diagnostic criteria. A better assessment will help you express how those difficulties impact on your life and your perception of yourself as a person. A better assessment, again, will help you through the assessment process reflect on that and what it's going to mean when these ideas all coalesce around these diagnostic criteria. Because it's not just, yes, you've got ADHD, no, you haven't. That's not, that is the very basic ADHD assessment. And yes, you can do that certainly in a couple of hours. It's possible to achieve that. It takes longer because you can sit next to someone in a bus stop and learn a little bit about them, but you're not going to know who they are. If you're seeking a diagnosis for ADHD, it's usually because things are going wrong and you're looking for a solution to things going wrong. You're not looking for any more than Tom was looking for an explanation of the exuberance of being Tom when things were going well. He made hay while the sun shone, but then when things started going wrong, he started to question whether that exuberance was actually counterproductive. But actually, now he's gone on to, okay, those 4 letters apply to me. It is ADHD. How do I express me and find that balance? And a lot of what Tom was saying was about finding balance and not necessarily doing away with 20-year-old Tom and how he was, but actually how do I capitalize on that, and how do I manage
Yeah.
that to a point that doesn't cause me problems in my life. That was what was coming across from what Tom was saying, and I think that's a valid thing to ask.
Yeah, I do.
But I think it's really important when you approach an assessment to think about what is it you're looking for. Are you just looking for that validation of those 4 letters? Because usually that's not what people think they're asking for. That's often what they come saying, I need a diagnosis. But that has meaning. And
Yes.
it's, why do you need a diagnosis now? What is it going to bring to you? And what are you going to do with it when it brings that?
Which leads me then neatly onto this next sort of question and focus from what Tom said. I mentor people all the time who will tell me that they want that validation. They want to know if it is ADHD, but they're not sure that they're ready for the next step, which in their mind may be being medicated. Now, that's often down to misunderstanding or misconceptions of what medication will do. It's a misunderstanding of what the process of titration is. However, I think it's important, and what I will say when I mentor is somebody, if they say they just want to know if it is, my question is, okay, if it is and you don't want medication, so what? What will you do differently? What will change? What is it you want? Are you looking for validation? Are you looking for ways of working that might be different? Are you looking for community? Are you looking for, what do you want out of that confirmation? But it's important that I think the way Tom described his own journey with medication to where he is, and there was a lot in this that I think is important. He seems to be at a place where he's got his own agency, where he's got his working dose of I think Concerta that he's on, but that he's choosing when to take it and why. And he's, like we asked, did he use it when he plays badminton? And he's tried, but he didn't like it. So let's talk medication then, because I think the way he spoke about it, I was really pleased to hear. I thought it was a really positive and mature and sensible way to talk about the fact that he'd worked clearly with his clinician and got to this dose. There was other stuff in it as well, though. There was still an element of experimentation and searching. I think he did a good job for me of explaining what titration should be about, which is finding a working dose, and him being the person. You said this in episode 1, him being the person saying, I think that feels more right than that, right? Yeah. And that understanding that more does not equal better. Yeah. So as clinician again, as somebody that prescribes, what did you take from that initially as that statement about how he spoke about dosing and the process of titration?
Okay, there were some things that as a clinician jarred a bit. So he said, I think he said he started at 72 milligrams, which I would never do. And I'm wondering whether he built up to 72 milligrams.
No, I think he was. I think he built up to and then came down.
And he described 72 milligrams as too much. And that line for me was really, really interesting, because what is too much? And I would want to explore that a bit more, because it might have been that it was good enough, it was right, but actually it was too much for Tom, and that's okay. That's completely valid. And he described going back to 36 and then, okay, let's see what 54 is like, and that's a really good way of doing that. But why was it too much, and what is it about 54 that's just enough? It would be what I would want to explore more, because I am not opposed to partial treatment, because it is a tool. I think Tom referred to it as like his glasses, and that's a metaphor that I will often use, because it is just a tool. That's all it is. It isn't an antibiotic that's taking away an infection. No. It's an aid to adjusting that transmission by chemicals in the brain. And I was really encouraged with what Tom was saying around having Fridays off.
Yeah,
that was brilliant. And his understanding of what that compromise is, as much as what the compromise of taking it again on a Monday morning is. So yeah, there was lots of positives in his understanding of medication, which was great.
Yeah, you asked him a very interesting question just on that point, because he said he doesn't take it Friday to Sunday. He takes it Monday, and you, I think, said, does it feel like it's almost the first time you take it every Monday? Now, I think he said it was like getting a new Duracell battery every Monday and feeling like, poof. Why, broadly speaking, why did you ask that? Because obviously you knew that would probably be the answer, and why is he feeling that? What's that about?
Okay, so that's about the shift that medication brings. So anybody that's taken a stimulant for the first time diagnosed with ADHD will say it's never worked like that again, and it is about that sort of shift from having had ADHD to, oh, this is a different type of focus. And often you don't get anywhere near that effect again because it's new and it's novel, so you get used to it. By stopping on Friday at the dose of 54 milligrams of Concerta, it's okay to go till Monday and take it again, but at those higher doses, the higher dose you go, when you come back to it, it feels more pronounced than it does, than it did on Thursday. It's not the same effect because you've had Friday, Saturday, Sunday without. So it's not a switch, Matt. It's not just, okay, I take this and I concentrate, and when I don't take it, I don't concentrate. Yes, it's safe to do that at lower doses, but it's not as simple as that because you're a person who's lived Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And stuff's gone on, and then you come back to that on Monday, and you're not going back to who you were on Thursday. You're progressing in your life, having had Friday, Saturday, Sunday without medication, and all that means, and that echoes back. Your history echoes into that,
But what I got from what Tom was saying, where he is now, is he's still looking for something. Even though he's got this dose that he feels is the right dose, even though he's got this agency to say, well, I don't take it Friday to Monday or Friday to Sunday, and I expect that new Duracell battery, I wonder how many people are still literally just considering that as it's a dopamine thing. And again, I wonder if this is an education piece about what else is connected.
Yeah, it is. That's the expectation, but culturally, and I use that in the broadest sense, the societal culture is, I go to the doctor, I get a medicine that makes things right, and everything's all right. So people come for assessment and treatment, expecting that is going to resolve all the issues from their history. And it's not that straightforward. We've talked about how complex the modulation of dopamine is. And I think, in my own experience, I was like, okay, it's just about upregulate dopamine and everything's going to be all right. And we've talked about how that's not the case. I think it's a lot more complex than that. And I don't think the science is there yet. Well, I know the science isn't there yet to explain this in great detail. We had a crack at it. But people want hacks. They want to be able to say, oh, I can just sort that out. And life ain't like that.
So that leads me on to this next thing that Tom mentioned. And I hear all the time, and I've been down that road as well, of looking for other things that will... The word I would use is I was looking for something to fill the gaps that I didn't think my meds were filling. But I didn't know what that gap was, and I didn't know what was included in that. So, for example, Tom mentioned lion's mane, which if you just go onto Instagram or TikTok, it's everywhere. And it's sold as an ADHD super food. Whereas lion's mane's teas, powders, whatever, and there are tons of others. There is an industry built around this. Why do you think that is? And do you think there is a fundamental lack of understanding of the gaps that we're trying to fill by looking at these other things that aren't medicine, if that makes sense, that aren't prescribed?
Yeah. So yeah, it's something that people do. You look for those gaps. Of course you do. And it's about the fundamental understanding of what ADHD is. that actually stimulants are quite a blunt tool in addressing the experience of ADHD, but it's a very effective blunt tool that I think we've, as a society, become quite seduced by. It's quite a nice idea to think, okay, these stimulants increase synaptic levels of dopamine, therefore, and they're really effective at helping with these things that we describe as ADHD. That's all true, but we are left with gaps, and understanding of natural remedies is changing. You know, the work of David Nutt in looking at psychoactive compounds like psilocybin, cannabis, which have been prohibited because they're illicit substances, it is creating this sort of groundswell of interest in what's out there in nature. But lion's mane in particular, yeah, it's a mushroom, but you know, you can have some pretty horrific experiences with mushrooms, and lion's mane's not one that's going to do that. But what lion's mane does is it stimulates nerve growth factor, so it's really good at helping the brain heal itself by stimulating the growth of neurons, brain cells. Yeah, that's what it does. And that's why we see increased dopamine and serotonin transmission, because we've got more brain cells as a result of taking lion's mane. What that doesn't factor in is the complex symphony of neurotransmission. It just bluntly increases the number of neurons. And there's lots of research coming out now about that and what that actually means. So there isn't any research that says lion's mane is good for ADHD. There's a piece missing. Lion's mane is good for cellular regeneration, and therefore we assume that because there's low dopamine transmission in ADHD means that it will help with ADHD, but it actually could be counterproductive. That's before you get into the chemistry of whether actually increasing the synaptic concentration of serotonin and the complex relationship between serotonin and dopamine in the synapse. And it's very blunt to say, okay, I'm going to take this that we know makes more brain cells, therefore that's going to make me better. It could make things worse. But the science isn't there to say that it does or it doesn't.
I've just sat listening to that, but you said one word that really hit home. I think Tom mentioned it briefly. Well, he used another, but you mentioned the word feel, right? Is there a risk without that research, knowledge, evidence, for those of us who may be emotionally sensitive, who may struggle with things like emotional dysregulation, RSD, and all those things that are really emotionally connected, even anxiety connected, that if we don't know exactly what these things do, we may trigger more negative consequences if we're taking, for example, lion's mane with.
Yeah. It's the same as I doubled up my dose of methylphenidate because I really had to concentrate, but it made me feel awful. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's not just the more dopamine, the better.
Yeah.
And you know, we've got that graph with the rainbow behind it to refer back to. It's finding that sweet spot, which is really difficult to do, because if we're just focusing on finding a sweet spot for dopamine, what impact is that having on acetylcholine? Or, you know, there aren't just these headline neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
It's more complex than that. It's a symphony. It's not a barbershop quartet, as I said.
So again, the word that keeps coming to mind, and hopefully that's what we are doing, the word that comes to mind is education. It's quality. It's not headlines and sound bites and 30-second reels with fantastic sounding claims that have got very little to no evidence. It's actual research, it's actual evidence, it's actually being able to say, hold on, as we've said before, my ADHD in comparison to your ADHD compared to Tom's and everyone else's, was it 528 different combinations you said before? 500 and some?
504.
504,
that's
right?
Just a mathematical thing, yeah.
So that, feasibly, there's very little way that you and I are going to present exactly the same, and that our reactions to medication plus will be exactly the same as well. So just because it says it on a shiny label with, the next great influencer saying, take this, does not mean that works. Does not mean that for you, that's the effect. And it's the education of caution, I suppose, is what I'm thinking.
I think that's true for things like lion's mane. It's true for lots of supplements, but it's worse than that, Matt. That's true for the prescribed medicines as well.
Yeah.
And I think what Tom was saying about the 72, 36, 54 journey, a lot of people don't get that. They get a titration to the minimum effective concentration, right? That's good, next. And actually, that is just, here's a unicycle, go and ride it. I couldn't do that. I know you can, but I couldn't do that.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I haven't got the skills to do that. Just because I've got a unicycle doesn't mean I can ride it.
No. And it is that constant learning, isn't it? And that constant education. I think what I take away from what Tom said and the way he said it is Tom he's curious. He's questioning. He's thinking about things. And I've often referred to myself as my own human guinea pig. I've tried lots of things, from supplements to natural to everything, with medication, without medication. So I can say, well, for me, the result was. But what I've always been very careful of not saying is, and that means for you. Because I don't know. I'm not walking around your head. I'm not seeing how that feels when you. And I think it's the same for prescription medication or supplements. It is trying to educate people early. But I think you said this before, the only person that really knows how it makes you feel is you. And you have to understand what it is you are trying to change in the first place to make a good decision about, is X working? But you're right, I think people forget that.
Because, it's 72 milligrams might work really well on Tom's ADHD, but Tom's so much more than that. What really struck me about Tom was how strong he was in his valuing of features of his ADHD.
Yeah.
He wants to capitalize on his strengths, and some of those strengths are defined as impairment under the diagnostic criteria of ADHD. And it was great to have someone talk about his journey of finding the right place for those features rather than trying to get rid of them. And I think that's why he settled on the 54 milligrams of Concerta, because it was the balance for him was right. And it allows him, with his Friday to Sunday off medication, to express that. Life didn't completely change when those 4 letters were attached to his medical records. It just gave him some context to continue on that journey, and likely there's more to come.
Yeah, I mean, without question on that. But yeah, I would echo what you say. The way Tom talks about his own ADHD, and in the content he shares as well, as he very openly admitted, all his content helps him learn about him as much as it might help someone else who resonates with it. And I think that's a very important piece of the work he does. And we spoke about this, finding community, whether it's peer support groups or whatever it may be. Post-diagnosis, it's about finding the tribe. It's about finding other people that you can talk to. Not to say, is it exactly the same, but just to feel like, I'm not on my own experiencing these things. I'm not on my own being challenged by or thriving with. But it does, I think without question, it does help more people, or helps everyone who finds their tribe, who finds someone to talk to and says, yeah, I do that as well. And Tom's doing a really good job of that. So while we're talking about jobs then, Tom's work as a recruiter, as a tech recruiter, leaning on his interests is interesting. He's very much, by his own admission, a geek, whether it's collecting, whether it's hobbies, but also in work. His bio describes him as, the tech recruiter that codes. So he's as interested in what people he's recruiting are doing as he is doing it himself. And I found that quite fascinating. I found that a very ADHD quality for someone to engineer a career where he's piquing his interest Monday to Friday. So he's working in a very niche field in terms of the VAR stuff and the technology with Hawkeye, but he's got that ability as an ADHD and that desire that he spoke about having from a child to be liked, to go from being the class clown to being the guy that does those posts that everyone remembers that help people, that then can help organizations learn about what good looks like in terms of recruitment and hiring and staff development. And I found that a really interesting, as a mentor and someone who talks about this day in, day out, I found that really fascinating, because I think it's, for me, it was so good. I could picture the little boy being told he was pretty and distracted, being really frustrated, because what I got the sense of was there was just a very creative little boy sat in the classroom all those years ago, and now he's getting to channel that creativity and that passion, and he's also getting that feel good factor of he knows he's helping other people as well, because he's been told he's getting that validation that I guess he was looking for in his assessment. So I just wanted to touch on some of the things that we mentioned with that, some of the things he said. In terms of organizations and the organizations I work with, Tom mentioned a few really basic fundamental things. I'd love to get your thoughts on these, right? First of all, job descriptions with jargon, adverts with jargon. Right? I understand why the jargon is there. But like Tom said, I can remember when I was still trying to have normal quote unquote jobs, looking at adverts, and I could pinpoint these and go, I've probably got 70% of what that's asking for, but because I don't have that 30%, that's not me. I can't apply. I would go into that rejected, there's no point, I'm never going to get a job mode. And yet, if that jargon had been simplified and it was about potential to learn, and it was about ability to demonstrate rather than must-haves, there are jobs I'd probably have applied for and could potentially have done pretty well in. So I think that's a really valuable point that he made about just plain English, plain language, plain explanations of what it is you're looking for in a person, what the role is there to do. Because you learn the jargon on the job. Once you're in a job, you learn all the tech and the words. And I wonder whether, as a clinician, what I hear when people struggle with that is that because our brain goes so fast, we're making jumps so far ahead that we then make the decisions that haven't been made on our behalf. Well, I'll never do that. They won't look at me. Because
so much in that. There's so much in that, because there's where should I go with this? I'd like to go first with my reaction to that bit of the conversation.
Right.
Because my reaction was, if that's in the job description and you're feeling rejected by them, are they even the employer for you? If they're going to put a job description like that out, then the business is operating in that way, hiding behind the emperor's new clothes of this certification and this experience and this essential criteria. If you're feeling excluded by that, you're damn well going to feel excluded in that environment. And what Tom was talking about was, again, that relationship between employer and employee.
Yeah.
And that the job description is the start of talking about that, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and if you read a job description and you think, whoa, that's not me, then that's probably not the company to work in, because that's the culture which is operating in that company. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to have really neuroaffirming companies that do well, and people are going to start to understand that they're doing well because they're neuroaffirming. And this idea that we have to have, I get this in sort of managing a healthcare company. There are so many rules and regulations and so many frustrating policy requirements and little ticks in boxes here, there, and everywhere for the man. And you know how frustrating that is. And those job descriptions that have that just talk of a culture. And I think it's going to be something that plays out, and we're going to see employers who look for qualities rather than qualifications will start to see themselves doing better. You see, you know, it's already happening in Silicon Valley.
Yes,
you know, and there is positive discrimination towards neurodivergence, because our brains process information differently, and that's what we're looking for in IT circles is those novel solutions that we're
Yeah.
brilliant at finding. We're not looking for just basic processing, which is reliable, and that has its function as well. So it's going to be an evolution of understanding that the difference is a good thing, and that there are strengths coming, and people like Tom are really at the forefront of pushing that message out there. That all right, I might be chaotic and I might not get my paperwork done, but look at this that I just came to me, and people go, wow, how did you do that? The number of sort of really successful people that I've worked with, and there's been a lot. That's been their edge. They've seen things that the rest of their colleagues did not see, and having the confidence to say, all right, it takes me ages to do that very basic thing that you think, you must be stupid because you can't do that, but give me a crisis and a problem that requires creativity and innovation, my brain's on it.
Yeah, and
it might take me months to write it down and communicate that in an accessible way to neurotypical brains, but I make that connection, and those first connections allow the development of innovation.
I agree.
I think that idea that Tom was talking about, making job descriptions, it wasn't simpler. It came across like he was just saying, make it simpler, but that's not I don't think what he was talking about. It was making it more complex, isn't it? It's about HR being aware of what exactly they're looking for from employees.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It isn't a certificate. It's what that certificate means. You see that in all aspects of life. There are very different psychiatrists that all have membership of the Royal College.
Yeah.
They've passed an exam that says they know this stuff and they can process this information this way. But no two are alike.
No, not at all. And I think that's what I get from it, when I consult with organisations on recruitment, particularly in best practice. I always start with the same principle. It's similar to what we've said about being ADHD or not. I want the people I work with to remember they're trying to fundamentally support people, not labels, not diagnoses, not deficits, not conditions. They're trying to support people. And the way to support people is to make it a culture where conversation is okay and it's safe and it's welcome. To make it a culture where being different and the strengths that can bring are celebrated just as much as the challenges are recognised and supported. It's not one without the other, because if you support someone's challenges, 9 times out of 10, they are able to demonstrate their abilities more. And I think what I still see a lot is organisations who just are a little bit stuck in deficit mode, a little bit stuck in this will be difficult mode, this is a problem mode, or worse, well, it's always been done like that. And it's that great old adage, just because it's always been done like that doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's been right for everyone. It means that nobody stopped and looked at it and gone, could we do this any differently, and would that help? And like Tom said, I think the one thing I would end with is he makes a very valid point that you could translate into any of this conversation. So commonly, the kind of things that would help neurodivergent people, whether it's in recruitment or interview or training or anything else, will help everyone else as well. They will. Because you are talking about making environments nicer to be in, making processes smoother, easier to understand, making communications simpler and more effective. And that will help everybody. Just still, unfortunately, takes the person with to go, boss, I'm struggling. I need a bit of help here. Can I get some help? But I think Tom's doing great work in trying to shout about those differences. Like you say, celebrating his differences as his strengths is a great way to encourage other people to feel that they're able to do it.
Yeah, but it flies in the face of society.
It does
because
at the moment.
education is all about, the kids in our house have just finished their exam season. It's all
Yeah,
about reaching that standard,
it is.
and it isn't
Yeah,
anything about the brilliance that sits outside of those standards. There's always, it's not black and white, because those standards need, you need those certificates in a recruitment process, because they are shortcuts to, that person meets that standard. But you lose something there, because you're looking for those commonalities and those core skills that you need. But if you just focus on that, you're not focusing on the wonder of the difference, the opportunity that individuality can bring to that role. And that's a harder thing to do as a recruiter, I think.
It is. It's
a brave recruiter to say, I'm going to give that person a job.
Yeah.
Because it potentially is a gamble, where the reassurance from all of these definitions and criteria, and it's that tension again, isn't it? It's people want to simplify things, and by simplifying things, they make them infinitely more complex.
Ain't that
always
the
a paradox, Matt. Always a paradox.
It blooming is, isn't it? Look, Andrew, what I would like to say, though, going back to Tom, going back to that episode, is what I really get from talking to Tom is someone who is actually very humble about where he's come, the fact that he's been able to get to where he is in spite of all the challenges he had. He's clearly very grateful for the people that stood by him, his family, and said, look, please get help, please get looked at. And he's a really great example of paying it forward, of just trying in his way to help others understand themselves. And I know that's very much, what you and I are aiming to do with this. I think he's given some brilliant personal insight into his experience. And as we've said in the last 50 or so minutes, a lot of this is going to resonate with so many people. Yes, me too. I do that too. I think that too. So do lean on resources, try and understand the things that Andrew's explained about assessments, about the process, about expectations, about the role of clinicians, the role of medicine. And if you are struggling with recruitment or confidence, that's where the role of mentors and coaches are really important. And you don't need a diagnosis to work with a coach, even an ADHD coach or a neurodivergent coach. You need to work with someone you resonate with and that you think will be able to understand you and will guide you through and help. And, there are some wonderful people out there, me included, I'm told. But do that. And for anyone working in organisations, talk to your neurodivergent staff. Number one, please have good employee resource groups. Let your staff, let your people have a voice. But do recognise that there are lots of very good educators and trainers and consultants, again, like myself, that's why I do what I do out there, who can help you understand. And finally, I'll say this, when it comes to clinicians, when it comes to assessments, they're not all made alike. That's why I'm really proud that, we are proudly in partnership with Divergence, that I believe in and trust the process and the ethics and the way that you do things at your clinic. And it is different. And I can say that hand on heart, it is different. It is, I want to use the word holistic in the sense of it puts the person first. And so I think it's very easy to get drawn into going for the first option when we're desperate for an assessment. I know I was guilty of that. Do find the clinician, do talk to people and find out who it is that you resonate with, because you will get the best care long term if you feel you've got that connection as well.
Thanks, Matt. It is about connection. It is about vulnerability. I think that's the key thing that I found from Tom, was how willing to be vulnerable he was. There aren't any sort of there isn't a mask, is there?
No.
Well, it didn't seem to be.
No.
And to be that bold, and here I am. I'm Tom. You know,
Yeah.
we'd not met before, and he was opening up on a podcast
Yeah.
with some very personal disclosures.
Mm.
There's been something about being able to do that for Tom that has taken him from being that lifeguard through to what he does now, and life has sort of fit around him rather than him trying to conform.
Yeah,
You know, he's not a
absolutely.
conformist. He never will be.
No.
Potentially that's the strength that the neurodivergent community bring, is that, yeah, we are different. We have been, you know, the 12-year-old Tom was excluded. You know, maybe you're making assumptions, but I suspect he didn't get invited to everybody's birthday party. But look at him now. He's making a difference. And yeah, that's what we're trying to do at Divergence. We're not right for everybody, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We're right for some. And, you know, if you're just looking for a quick, yep, it's ADHD, there's the medication, then yeah, that's not how we do it.
No, quite right too. Right, Andrew, thank you very much, everyone. I hope that new style of episode helps, and then what it's enabled you to do is sort of reflect on the things Tom said, get some more context from Andrew's experience, and maybe to go away and think about how that may reflect on you and what that may mean to you. As ever, you can get in touch with us via the podcast. The email address is going to be in the show notes. But for now, we look forward to seeing you for the next episode of Talk ADHD.